b.l.u.e, Legend of Water, which is a Hudson Soft PlayStation 1 game, actually. I don't want to call this like a diving game. I'd say it's more of like a swimming adventure puzzle game, plus you have a dolphin kind of thing. But before we get too deep into it, I want to just kind of note something real quick. So I ended up playtesting this title. I don't really think that's a conflict of interest personally. I mean, Hilltop, the guy who does the translation, or like runs the project at least, he does have like a Patreon, and I don't know what goes on with that Patreon personally, but like I don't get any money from this. Really, I just played a video game and looked out for like typos and stuff like that. It's really all that really happened with that. Also, it's worth noting that like any footage that I show of this game probably be from the pre-final translation release. So if you do see something weird in there, ideally it's been fixed in the final build. So, but the reason I wanted to kind of define this game as like not a diving game first and foremost is because this is not like a game like Endless Ocean on the Wii where you're going underwater, you're exploring, you're looking at fish, you're documenting those fish in a book kind of thing. That's often like an element of diving games and things like that. But this game really doesn't have any of that. And it's not really like a big, like, open-ended place that you can kind of go and explore kind of thing. It's actually a fairly linear game where you kind of go underwater, you have these like kind of pockets of ocean you swim through, and then at the end of certain parts of those pockets, there's like a sunken ship, there's like a ruins. There's really not a lot actually, but there's a few kind of key areas that you kind of go visit and revisit. And the point of kind of going to those areas really is to go and explore and look for items and probably most importantly, kind of solve puzzles and or find keys that open up doors kind of thing. The big thing is just getting access to more places in these spaces that you go to. If you ever played like a Tomb Raider of the era or like a Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, you know, it's going to be very similar to those kind of things. And it's just kind of like pretty straightforward puzzle solving overall from that kind of gameplay aspect. So really what this game does to differentiate itself is add in the underwater part of this game, right? So like a lot of other underwater games I've played, you know, what this really does is it kind of just adds a additional bit of tension to kind of everything you do in a game kind of thing, right? And what that means for each game depends on the genre of the game in a lot of ways. But because this is a kind of puzzle game, what this ends up being is a game where you kind of have to control a timer while you're solving puzzles. So you can obviously go and like sit in air pockets and take all the time to think about what you're doing in a puzzle. But if you want to go actually like look at the puzzle and try to solve the puzzle, you have to be fairly quick about it kind of thing. And the balance of these kind of underwater games often comes down to like how accessible is air. You don't want it to be so accessible that it's like never a threat to the player. But you don't want it to be so inaccessible that, you know, you have to go and like solve a puzzle as quickly as possible, and you have to be perfect in your execution kind of thing. You need to leave leeway and stuff like that. And I think this game generally does a good job of finding that balance, so it adds just like a little bit of extra tension to all aspects of this game as you kind of have this ongoing air meter in the top right corner of the screen, but it's never like something that's so oppressive that it becomes like really, really annoying. So that's kind of, I think, the even though it's not a unique gimmick, I think that's like really what makes this game stand out from like a gameplay perspective overall. Now there is like a secondary aspect of this game, like on the box art itself, there's just literally like I think it's a girl and a dolphin sitting on the box art. And so this dolphin buddy is somebody who can help you in like a variety of different ways. There's a little AI companion that kind of follows you around, and you can go into the menu and change him to like different types of modes that he's in. So you have like a search mode where basically if he sees anything of interest, he'll go and like point it out and be like, and go and like, you know, point at it. And then you also have like a co-op mode that basically he'll help you do something. Most of the time it's just like push something. So like a boulder you need to push. So you go and he'll help you push the boulder if he's in co-op mode. There's a standby mode where he just stays in one spot, which, you know, most of the time isn't really relevant, but you'll find occasional spots where there's like a little switch that you'll need to like leave him on while you go off and do something else to make sure you can keep the door open so he can come through to it kind of thing. And then finally, there's like an escort mode. And the escort mode is maybe the one that's a little confusing on exactly when it's useful at times. But overall, it really just is a way for you to kind of like grab onto your dolphin buddy and he'll kind of help you swim up currents and things like that. It's a cool gimmick, and like as a selling point, I think it's a cool selling point overall. But it is something that I don't think is like super well utilized throughout most of the game. I think there's maybe like 2 puzzles that I can think of off the top of my head that really stood out to me as like, oh, this is like a neat use of this dolphin character kind of thing. But most of the time the game seems to, I don't know if it has to tell you to use it, but it will often offer you the information very quickly and be like, you should use this to solve this problem kind of thing, right? And so a lot of times it feels almost like every time you interact with this mechanic, there's almost like a tutorial aspect to it of just the game telling you, hey, you should kind of thing. So most of the time, I think the dolphin is a part of this game that doesn't really hurt it in any way. But for as long as he swims around you as you go through the entire video game, it feels like it's just really not the focus. Maya, who's the main character of this game, is really going to be the one solving most of the puzzles in pretty traditional ways that you'd expect, other than the fact that, like, you know, you're underwater. So when you're putting, like, the different pieces of a stone tablet together, you have to go swim around and pick up all the pieces and put it on the wall kind of thing, rather than, like, putting it together in your inventory or something like that. So the dolphin, who has a name, his name is Luca. He's not really an important character, but I think he is important as a whole because he's important to Maya specifically. Luca himself is kind of like a grounding point for her, especially like early on. So kind of the setup for this game initially is you are coming onto this like research vessel essentially, and your dad is the head of this research vessel. And so you're coming on this ship, and there's like a bunch of coworkers, you don't know any of them kind of thing. And so this dolphin, I don't remember if they ever tell you, but for some reason, you've had this relationship with this dolphin at some point. So he's kind of like a nice little anchor point for Maya as a character, her friend in some ways, right? Which is kind of a weird way to put that, but it's not like the ship's like super oppressive either or something like that, right? The characters overall in this game, I think, are really fun. They may be a little light in terms of like depth, and a lot of them, like, I think, rely pretty heavily on different types of stereotypes for you to kind of figure out, you know, what type of characters they are. But I do think they're like really fun to interact with. This game kind of reminds me of, you know, I mentioned the fact that like your dad takes you on this ship or whatever, and like you're just kind of going around and just like talking to his coworkers while they work and stuff like that. And so like if you ever went to your dad's office when you were a kid and just went around and talked to the coworkers, there's this kind of like weird like thing where like everyone's gonna be really nice to you, but also they have to do their job kind of thing. So they kind of somewhat ignore you. So they have like these really cute interactions with you. And they talk just kind of like vaguely nice to you as a person, but at the end of the day, you're kind of none of their business. So most of the time it's just like they're eating or working on a computer or something like that, and they just like turn and talk to you for a little bit, and that's kind of it. But it does lead to like these little cute things of just like characters being kind of playful and things like that. There's just like one guy, he's just like this really quiet guy, and like I feel like half the time Maya's just like not sure what to do with like interactions with him, so it's just this really awkward exchange every time. And I feel like every character has this little like gimmick that kind of makes Maya's interactions with them just like really fun and really cute overall. So I guess you could call this like a take your daughter to work day simulator in some ways, except for you're playing the daughter, so I guess your dad's taking you to work kind of thing. So but I feel like these like little interactions and things like this are kind of like the highlight of this game's story to me. The actual main plot, I don't know. I'm kind of okay with the main plot. I think it's fine. Basically, kind of where this story goes is that, you know, you're coming to this ship, and then you go to sleep, and then some voice appears in your head that's like, come down to the ruins. And like your dad's like, do not go down to the ruins. He does not know this voice thing's happening, but he keeps telling you, do not go down to the ruins. But like within 24 hours, you are down in those ruins. So she's gonna call down to the ruins, and then like basically the ruins like activate to her, and so she opens up doors that nobody's been able to get into before and things like that. And so initially it starts out as this thing of like curiosity for her kind of thing. But as time goes on, the crew kind of realizes oh, she's like going down there and like finding all this interesting stuff. And so even though your dad's like, I don't really want you down there because it's dangerous, but these doors are opening for you, so please just go get more stuff kind of thing. So you just kind of start working with the crew more directly kind of by the end of the story. It kind of culminates down to, I feel like, the kind of usual story with these kind of ruins-based games of just like, who done it? Who made the ruins, right? Is it God? Is it aliens? Is it like old humans with technology kind of thing, right? And so, you know, do the video game lottery of who is responsible kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting to some degree though, because it is like this kind of big story that's happening on the side, and it just doesn't feel very important. At least to me, it didn't feel very important. And it feels like the story is much more about like Maya's space and all this stuff that's happening. And so you're learning about all this through Maya's perspective. And Maya, as like a teenage girl, does not seem to care about what's going on otherwise. She's just there to be like, why am I getting called down to these ruins? Why do all these doors open for me? what's up kind of thing. And so it's like, I think it puts on blinders in terms of like what it focuses on the storytelling in really smart ways to make it feel like it is a story almost solely from the perspective of, I assume Maya's a teenage girl. I actually don't know her age. She's more focused on what's going on in her day-to-day life kind of thing. So I think it's like pretty good with that. Although your mileage of what you'll get out of the story seems like it might vary. So like there's different endings you can get. So like your endings are marked by like the number of symbols you get. I don't know 100% how it works, but I got like 4 out of 5 symbols. So I guess I got like a 4 out of 5 ending or something like that. I don't know. And so it seems like that changes like the content of the story based off the things you do in the game. And sometimes it literally can just be like how you perform. So like in my case, at the end of the game, they'll tell you like, hey, maybe you should have disarmed the bomb earlier. Because at some point there's a bomb in this game and you need to disarm it. And I literally cut the wire at like the last second mark kind of thing. So apparently I needed to cut that wire a lot earlier to get a better ending, or at least that was a part of getting a better ending kind of thing. So there is that kind of aspect to it. So I don't know, like I only got that one ending, so I don't know what the situation is going to be depending on the different types of endings you get. But most of the game feels like if you're just paying attention to what's happening, and like if a character goes like, hey, remember that thing that was like in the ruins that you couldn't do? What if you go back and do that thing real quick? And as long as you take the time to go back and do that thing and like not just go off to the next major story point, it seems like generally you'll probably at least get pretty far along. So in the game, it took me like 8 hours to get through the game, but ultimately I don't think it's like a super long game. And I think once you know what you're doing, like you don't need to go talk to everybody on the ship all the time kind of thing, right? Once you know what's going on in that section and what you need to do, you can kind of speed run through that kind of thing, right? So I think if you do want to get all the endings, it wouldn't be like a huge deal, but also I don't really know like how different all the endings are either. But thankfully, like it being in English, I think is a really big help with that part of the game a lot. And then also like I think in appreciating the dialogue and being on the ship kind of thing, right? So I'm glad it got translated and is English. And again, super thanks to everybody who did actual work on this kind of thing. Because, playtesting it, for the most part, I wouldn't say it was like that much different than me just playing the video game per usual. The one thing that maybe would have affected my experience as a playtester that it would have caused me to like have a different opinion on the game possibly is there is one puzzle probably about like halfway through the game, and the hint for that puzzle, how it was translated at the time, was not descriptive enough, but we did eventually get like an updated translation, and that solved kind of my issue with that puzzle. But the bigger thing is I think the puzzle was just kind of tedious as a whole in general, because it basically asks you to like move these gems from these like statue hands, and you have to like weigh them, and you only get 2 chances to weigh them. Then you have to reset the entire room and reweigh them all, and it's just kind of tedious. But I think it wouldn't have been as tedious if I knew from the start what I was trying to do versus, what I was like when I was trying to solve the puzzle in the incorrect way. It was obviously more tedious because I kept having to do this. So it was like the one part of the experience that was maybe affected by the fact that like I was playing with a unfinished version of that game, and also, I was in a situation where it might be a little more confusing. But I think that's really the only thing that really stood out to me is like the one hiccup. Kargadin, which we've talked about before, we played in their Nappletail translation. She was involved in this project as lead translator, but Hilltop is kind of the lead name on the project at the very least. So, and he's previously translated like Racing Lagoon. I don't know anything about Racing Lagoon, so I can't help you there. But more important for us, Hilltop is the one who translated Aconcagua, which, again, I have not played this translation of Aconcagua, but Aconcagua is a very cool game, and I played it back in like 2014 or something like that, and I love that game. And props to anybody who's gonna fan translate that game. If you're gonna play one of 2 games, play Aconcagua. Go play Aconcagua if you haven't played Aconcagua. But b.l.u.e is a very fun little puzzle game as well, and I think it's if you can go ahead and throw in a couple hours to see how you like it, I think you'll get an idea if it's your kind of thing, and then from there finishing the game isn't gonna take that much longer. It's gonna take like another 4 hours or something like that on top of that.